Hello, everybody. I'm Pontius, and welcome back to Unexpected Awesome. Over the last 5 or 6 odd years, I've only ever really had one project that discusses something in a largely negative route, so I figured it's important to have balance in all things, and today we're going to be diving into what should have been crime thriller cult classic that is The Crimson Kimono. Opening up exceptionally with an exotic dancer being hunted by a trenchcoat bedecked assailant for being viciously shot down in the Los Angeles streets, a pair of detectives are brought in to investigate her death, largely because of their potential connection to Little Tokyo, as the killer themselves opened up first on an oriental-themed painting of the dancer in a stark red kimono. A dual investigation begins, with the Japanese-American detective going into Little Tokyo and talking to his connections there to figure out how her act of a beautiful woman being fought over by a judo practitioner and a samurai fit into the motive and identity of her murderer, as well as his white buddy's discovery of the painter of the punctured portrait goes on to find an identity of who commissioned the mysterious piece. This, of course, blossoms into a revelation of affection by the white detective and an almost cold war of affections between the two longtime friends and men as they find themselves clashing almost unknowingly over the painter and lead suspect in the case. This all sounds remarkably strong in concept and on paper, with the act that the dancer surmised mirroring the future conflict between the two detectives over the woman, and ultimately in reflecting the similarly vicious passions that the actual killer, an assistant to the man who commissioned the painting, murdering the dancer, and eventually chasing down after the painter over jealousy, but none of it really gels together well, because despite its strong opening, the story becomes increasingly focused on the romantic love triangle between the two detectives, almost entirely to its detriment, almost forgetting about the salacious and ultimately intriguing opening of the film. Pair this up with an uninspired style and presentation of overarching story, and you've got probably one of the least compelling crime films, at least in experiencing the questions of crime and possibility of punishment around each corner. However, not all is unworthy inside of this film, for unlike a lot of films from the golden age of cinema, with its dubious at best and uncharitable at worst presentations of Asian culture and what there was of casting, this movie does have some of the best casting and most authentic representations of Asian American culture of the time period, making clear cultural, linguistic, and traditional distinctions between Japanese and Korean subcultures living inside of Los Angeles at the time, with mentions going to not only to Japanese Americans who were raised in Japan and Japanese Americans born in Japan and raised in America, all the way down to references to specific army units, one of which are one of our main characters portrayed too brilliantly for this film by the late underrated James Shigeta as American patriots serving in the Pacific Theater. And James Shigeda's performance really does stand as the iconic and most memorable aspect of the film, because he brings class, depth, and intensity to his role. He can be as soft-spoken as a philosopher and as rough as a two-bit gumshoe, but in all of this, he gives far too much work for material that's not thick enough to actually use his talents. It's telling that a story about a man who's composed and logical, assimilating into a very law and order driven profession, losing control impromptuli at a kendo match over a man that doesn't even know he's competing with him for affections of a woman. It just feels like it comes out of left field, even though saying it out loud, it sort of almost makes sense on paper. As such, The Crimson Kimono serves as a standard, if not slightly more culturally sensitive crime film of its time period. So if you're in the mood for anything other than a fairly authentic look at the changing and shifting identity of Japanese and Korean American subcultures in California in the 1940s, you'd be not blamed for steering clear of The Crimson Kimono. Stay golden.